If you suffer with romantic obsession, you can't stop longing for someone, you're thinking about them all the time, your life and your emotions are kind of chained to this fantasy of being with them someday, even if you know they're not into you. If that's happening for you, there's a very good chance that when you were a small child, you didn't get your emotional needs met. Neglect in childhood is a huge risk factor for developing limerence later on. Now, limerence is a romantic obsession or infatuation with someone who you're not with. You're thinking about them is like an addiction, and it can kind of take over your life. And if you've gotten limerent before, you probably have some shame about the way you felt, things that you did or said, or maybe you kept it secret from other people. But you know what? Limerence, it turns out, probably has a big genetic component, and it's driven neurologically. It's most likely to happen if you were neglected in early childhood, and I'm telling you, when it strikes, limerence is so painful. So why does this happen? My letter today is from a woman who happens to be a nun, and I'll call her Sophia. She writes, "Dear Fairy, since I discovered you, I've improved so much. I can't tell you how much you're helping me, but I have a problem I'm hoping you can help me with. I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to, but let's read through Sophia's letter one time to see what's going on." All right. She says, "I grew up in a poor family. When I was 20 days old, my mom became very ill and wasn't able to take care of me. My father had to take me to a neighbor to be breastfed. I'm told my mother sometimes used to hit me when I was a baby. I think she had postpartum depression. Her illness lasted almost 2 years. I'm at least grateful that they told me what happened. At school, I was bullied and sexually abused by a teacher. I had no friends until I was in 5th grade, and thank God she's still my friend. Today I'm a nun, and I'm sending you this letter because I'm living through an unbelievable situation and I'm struggling. I fell in love with someone 17 years younger than me. It's not the first time I fell in love with someone. Once I fell for someone the same age as me and once with someone older, but I take my vocation very seriously and I was responsible, so nothing happened. The feelings I have now may be love or they may just be limerence. This is a man who contacted me a year ago because he needed advice around a problem he was having in his life. I talked to him and we had regular conversations and there was no problem. I saw him as a young man who needed to talk and that's it, and nothing happened in my heart. But 5 months ago, my mother died. And he became very close to me. He said that I helped him and now he was helping me. Thanks to his friendship, I didn't go into depression. Maybe 2 months ago, I became concerned about what I was feeling for him. I thought, if he's going to tell me that he has a girlfriend, I am going to cry. And a few days later, someone told me that he is seeing someone. I didn't expect what I felt in that moment. I almost cried and then changed the subject quickly so that I could prevent the tears. In my deepest heart, I said, thank God I found out about the girlfriend from someone else, which I thought would be less painful than having him tell me personally. Now, maybe 2 weeks later, he called to give me the news. I said, I'm very happy for you, and I was happy, but I wanted to end the call very soon because I felt that I was going to cry. I was happy because I thought, now that I know, all that remains is to overcome this. But it was a month ago, and it's getting worse. Like I'm having an obsession with him. It's hard for me to believe this is happening. I deleted all our conversations, but I can't stop thinking about him and waiting for a text from him. I can't help writing to him. When we started communicating, he was really responsive. He used to write to me or answer my messages right away, and he appreciated that I knew when he saw my messages. Then he began to leave me in seen, and I think that's another way of saying on read. And he answered 2 or 3 days later after I wrote to him, and he always would apologize for leaving me in seen, always in a friendly way, saying something good about me, like, I like the way you are, you're so intelligent. When I read your messages, it's like I'm hearing your voice. I became very attached to him, and I think not in a romantic way. I never imagined kissing him or something like that, but now I don't trust myself that I can cut this contact. Several times I promised to myself I wouldn't message him, and then a few minutes later I'd be texting him, and I began to wait again for his answer. It's like a curse. I feel like I'm a bottomless sack. Nothing he could say or do will fill this deep, hurtful feeling I'm living through. I'm having insomnia and anxiety, and sometimes I cry like a child. The situation is so difficult for me. Honestly, I didn't expect this to happen to me because I'm a nun and because of the difference in our age. I want to know what you think about this, and if you can give me any advice, please, I need your help. Sophia. Okay, Sophia, I do think I can help. I feel for you. Oh my goodness, how painful this is. What you told me about your childhood, it just makes so much sense that limerence would strike you. And I also take very seriously your vocation as a nun. And I feel protective of you. I worry that commenters are going to jump in and say, oh, you're having feelings about somebody. You're getting limerent because you have taken a vow of celibacy. But I would just like to point out that lots of people get limerent, and they are free to date and sleep with and marry whoever they want to. But people get limerent because of a childhood wound and unmet needs at that time. But yes, you have a challenging vocation. You're in a situation that is complicates the whole thing a little extra bit there. But because he's so much younger than you, and because your relationship began as a spiritual support or mentorship, you have ordinary complications here that any kind of relationship of this nature would have. So I'm just with you. I think you're normal. What happened to you as a child, what's happening now, it all makes so much sense. I don't think there's anything wrong with you, Sophia. And this is one of the things that happens to us. So you had said you grew up in a poor family, and when you were 20 days old, your mom was so sick she couldn't care for you, and you had to go to a neighbor to breastfeed. So as I understand it, you lived in a place rural. I know English isn't your first language. I did modify a little bit for clarity, but going off to breastfeed at a neighbor. I'm glad somebody could do that and give you that physical contact, but there's that separation from your mother, who you were already bonded with at 20 days, is so painful and sad. And then your mom used to hit you. To hit a baby, you have to be pretty messed up. And your conjecture that she had postpartum depression sounds quite possible, especially because it went on for 2 years, and then she was back to whoever she was before. Okay, but then at school, you were bullied, you were sexually abused by a teacher, you had no friends until 5th grade. What's up with that? What happened? I wonder if that was your abandonment wound still activated. Who knows? We can always look back and try to guess, like, why am I the way I am? What caused this? But of course, we're each created differently, and you are you, and very unique and special in just how you are. And these aren't necessarily horrible things about you, that you would have, that you are slow to make friends, that you fall in love even though you've taken a vow, that you're just human, and your humanity is beautiful, and I accept you. I'm so sorry you were bullied and abused by a teacher. That is something so many of us have gone through, and it just does something to you that it's very hard to talk about or address or do anything about, and then we find out later how it plays out. So today you're a nun, and I commend you for living a life of service, making that level of commitment to serve others, to try to be good, to try to have a consciousness that brings love into the world is a very noble and holy thing, and I appreciate you for that. And now you're struggling. So you fell in love with someone 17 years younger, and you didn't say how old you are, but I assume he's an adult and you're 17 years older than that, whatever that is. It's not the first time you've fallen in love before. That happens. And nothing happened with those people, but this time your feelings are so strong. So first you had a friendship with him. He contacted you. He needed advice about a problem, and you talked and had regular conversations, which is totally normal for people to talk to clergy or religious for, emotional or spiritual support. That's common. And occasionally people get feelings for each other. And the responsible thing is what you have done is restraint. So because you are in a position of authority, and also because of your vow, you have an obligation to restrain yourself, and you have, and you're asking for help. And I commend you. Well done, well done. So everything was okay, but then 5 months ago your mother died, and then you became close to him. So you say thanks to him, you haven't had a depression. But I'm going to suggest something. I'm not a therapist, but I think that limerence is like a depression. It's a depression that's twisted a little bit. It's kind of rotated around, and we have all the same emptiness, but we're coping with a terrible pain and loss with a fantasy of love with somebody who can never be. Like, limerence doesn't work on somebody who's actually with us. It can't persist, because real people who actually can be with us, they just have all their annoying habits. They disappoint us. They overwhelm us. We get to have the experience of day-to-day life with them, and so we can't really have magical thinking so much around them. But in a state of grief and depression, not only because it's your mother, but because of your mother's wounding of you when you were little, what I notice is that feeling of just being totally loved that you didn't get to have from day 20 until about 2 years old, that feeling of uncertainty, that everything being scary and you being alone in the world, that would be the feeling underneath limerence that would drive to manufacture at any cost the feeling of love, the idea of love, the idea that another person would be this side-by-side comfort to you. And I get what you mean. Limerence often doesn't have like a sexual romantic component like it does, but it's usually not about that. It's some kind of like emotional completion fantasy. If I could just be with this person and they would return my feelings, I could be fully myself, but have it not be you. And I know that feels like a terrible sacrifice, but this is how you can get back your joy and your integrity. And he's still out there in the world. Who knows? Maybe there's a day sometime down the road when he will be your friend again. But it's not very likely. Right? Once limerence has sort of like, put its claws in a relationship, it kind of ruins it. And so you can take your time about this decision if you want to, but you're asking me, I would just do it quickly. Just back off of it. Don't tempt yourself. Don't text him no matter what. Just stop the texting, because that's right now the texting is functioning as a trigger, and you are having a neurological reflex that is triggered by contact with him and then waiting for his reply. It's a happy feeling, isn't it? Texting somebody you really like and they text you back. It's such a happy feeling. You just want more and more and more of it. I don't blame you. It's a nice feeling, but and I know that the nice feeling is like a tip of an iceberg, and the bottom of the iceberg is going to smash the ship. It could really hurt him, and it could really hurt you. So this thing about leaving you in scene or on red, and how the things are getting farther apart, that suggests to me that he senses that stuff is getting a little too close. So that's your cue. Now is the time. Now is the time to straighten this out. I love what you said here. You described limerence so well. It's like a curse. Yes, it is. It's like a curse. It's like this love for something that you can never have. And I feel like I'm a bottomless sack. Yes, nothing he can say or do will fill the deep, hurtful feeling that you're living through. And that, I usually don't psychologize, but I do think, Sophia, that the reason, no matter how nice he is, or even if in a magical world you could get together and marry this guy and he would love you, it still wouldn't fix that feeling of the loss that you had as a baby, for which there is no replacement. There's no replacement. I mean, we're resilient, beautiful souls, and we carry on and we learn to love and be loved. And in your role as a nun, I imagine you give love and support to so many people. You're a friend to all, a mother to all, a sister to all, and that's so beautiful. And so you have love in your life, but nothing can replace what you lost when you were a baby. So I had a similar thing. My mom left when I was little. She eventually came back. She would come and go a little bit. And, we can't remember what that was like, but it was just like this, It was just like this. I know you know babies. I've had babies, and they are just inconsolable when they think that you've gone. So a mother who is mentally healthy and who is not in some sort of traumatic situation or with postpartum depression is very vigilant to making sure the baby never fears about that. It's hard to avoid, though. And I could tell you stories about times my kids got scared thinking I wasn't going to come back. It was a mistake, and I did come back, but they thought so. And the crying and the redness and the very sad, very moving for me. And I've had some deep conversations with the kids then when those incidents happened, and now again to just say, you've got me. And you can be you in front of me, and whatever the problem is, I've got your back, I love you, I'm with you, I believe in you, and there's nothing you can do that will change that. And of course, as young people who basically got their needs met, they're like, yeah, Mom, okay, shut up. But you and I know, Sophia, how precious it is to have your mother feel that way about you. So we didn't get it, but we're giving it to others. So then you said you're having insomnia and anxiety and sometimes cry like a child. That sounds like grief. It sounds like grief. This situation is so difficult and you didn't expect it because you're a nun. And I'm just still going to guess. This is displaced grief. Your mom died just 5 months ago. A lot is coming up and it's displacing onto this guy because it's kind of hard to face about your mom because A, she's gone, and B, she hurt you. She used to hit you. So it's hard to feel pure, gentle grief and let it pass through you. But I know you can do that. And I believe you have support to do that in the situation that you're in. And you certainly have my support. And I hope that you will stay connected to our community where we can all support you and love you through this as the grief just washes through you about what happened in the past and what you've lost. And then all the good things that you will be doing in your life going forward. So you can do this. Dear Fairy, I've been working on my CPTSD on and off throughout most of my 20s, and I'm in therapy now. I'm 30. My best friend since high school has been with me through it all, despite having seen and been impacted by my ugliest behaviors, and he's stayed my friend anyway. I fell in love with him sometime, somewhere, during our long friendship. We eventually got together briefly, and I told him how I felt. He didn't feel the same and didn't want to risk our friendship. I told him I understood and tried to stop my feelings, but I couldn't. Eventually, I asked for space and told him that I needed time away from him so that I could find a real relationship with someone else. I'm going to circle that. He told me I deserved that. Our relationship became superficial for several years, although we always kept in touch. In the meantime, I started dating, and last summer I married my husband and officially became stepmom to his 6-year-old son. I think my relationship with my husband is good. He makes me laugh, we're honest, we work on our issues together. There's a reason I chose him, but it's also routine now. It's doing the dishes and arguing about parenting and worrying about money. Throw in the pandemic and we're drowning in monotony, arguing and anxious and too on top of each other. It's been a very hard year and a half. Yeah, you and me, Fairy, and it certainly doesn't seem like it's going to end soon. So enter my best friend, says Rachel. We started hanging out in person again this spring once we both were vaccinated. I opened the door, foolishly thinking that now that I was married, I didn't need to be cautious anymore. And sure enough, my old unrequited feelings are flooding back. He makes me so happy, and I feel so much less lonely now. It's such a relief to be myself with him, my full self, not just a wife and a stepmom. I don't have many close friends, and I don't want to lose him again. But I also know it's not fair to my husband, that this could be dangerous to my marriage. Plus, I went down this road before, and he didn't want me. Why would it be any different now when I'm less available than I was before? I guess what I'm asking, Fairy, is how do I do this? How do I soothe the obsessive CPTSD drive that makes me crave his attention, that flirts with the idea that one person could save me, could love me unconditionally, and still keep both these important relationships in my life? I know my feelings are an illusion. Even if I were to somehow change the timeline and was with my best friend, there would still be dishes to do, and I love my husband and our life together. I don't want to mess that up. Can you help me? And I want to add in that something in her letter that I didn't read at the beginning is that she says she grew up in a very enmeshed and codependent household and was also sexually assaulted multiple times as a teenager. Just said that very quickly in the letter, and I think that's relevant. So she says, thank you for all you do. All right, Rachel, I am so glad you wrote and that you asked for advice, and I hope it's not too late to reach you. This is such a good question and good for you. Really positive move. So many of us with CPTSD, when we get into situations that are uncomfortable or shameful or something we can't be honest about, we just hide more, and you didn't. You're here. So thank you for that. Also, when you share this problem with everybody who's watching this video, we all get to learn from your experience. So you've done a very good thing here. You had a rough upbringing, and I want to congratulate you that you managed to find a marriage with a good person to become a stepmom with them and to get to the phase of marriage that literally every couple gets to, which is when you've been together for a little while, yes, it's a lot of doing dishes, it's a lot of working out your issues, especially if you had trauma when growing up in the way that you attach to your parents. And what you're describing is, yeah, that's going to make it complicated. What I noticed when I got married is that I had gone into it thinking I was being realistic. You know, my marriage is my second marriage. And so I knew that marriage wasn't going to like fix me. It wasn't going to make all the trauma go away. But actually being in a good marriage where I was loved and with somebody who was steady for me really gave an opportunity for some old stuff to come out about the way that I feel so let down by what happened in the past. And like there was this like huge buildup of stuff that I had never really had anybody care about that I had gone through. And I came into the marriage, like we had been together 5 years when we got married, but at the beginning, there was a whole bunch of emotional stuff from me where I was like, okay, now I'm expecting a whole bunch of stuff to be carried by you. And another person can't really do that. So I'm just going to say, like, it is so understandable for you to be going through some issues right now, a year and a half into a marriage, and especially because you're going right in as a step parent and that has its own issues. I'm really happy for you though. Like making that kind of commitment can be so life affirming and so it can help you grow so much. So you very rightly pointed out, like, you know that a lot of this, like if you were to be with this best friend romantically, even if that could work out, it still would come back to dishes and issues and all that unfinished business from your childhood that hasn't been healed yet. No matter who you're with, it's going to sort of like get directed at them, and that's going to have to be worked out. And that's understandable, and it's okay. And you have a chance right now to work out your stuff with somebody who actually does want to be with you. One thing I circled is you said that eventually when your friend made it clear that he wasn't interested in this being romantic, you asked for space and told him you needed time away so you could find a real relationship with someone else. And he agreed that you deserve that. Good for him, good for you. And I think what's happening now is you're wobbling. And I can imagine how when you said this and made this boundary, part of you didn't think that really that was where things are going. I could be projecting, but sometimes when we feel like there's a great love with somebody, we want to kind of up the ante with them and be like, you know, I'm going to be with somebody else, and hope that maybe that will kind of push them over the edge and want to be with us. But here's the weird thing I've learned about limerent relationships. So let me tell you about limerence a little bit here. Limerence is a word that was made up not that long ago to talk about this kind of love that's not really love. And what it's characterized by is a total idealization of another person, a total preoccupation with them where you're thinking about them like all the time, where you find yourself, this is a really key thing, you find yourself searching for clues that they feel the same way. And part of limerence is that you're not together. Like, I think occasionally people have limerence and they do get together with that person and they have the chance for the relationship to morph into the kind that you have now with your husband that's ordinary, that's like real love. Real love is the kind that does dishes together, and it's the kind that can love each other and stay with each other through those times when your stuff is coming up and you're being unreasonable and you come through and you heal together. That's real love. And that is really what I would hope for everybody, is that they find that, because for reasons we don't totally understand, you know, part of this, it could be a brain thing. It could be partly the influence of like TV and movies. But a lot of us are powered by this belief that there's like a true love out there. And if they would just realize it, like everything would be so great. And with that trauma in our background, we have the capacity to think that about people who have said flat out, yeah, I don't feel that way about you. And it's so easy to say to you when it's you, you know, when it was happening to me, it's like I couldn't, you know, it muddies the water so much when it's you, because something in your brain is just so sure, like if they would just see it, it would be great. And looking back on that now with a little healing under my belt and being free from that limerence, I would say that what I can see now is, while there are kinds of love or friendship in there, it's a projection, and it is not something that would work out anyway. Like if you have the luxury of knowing this person who you feel this way about 20 years from now, you may find it's like, oh my gosh, there isn't that compatibility right there. Because if there was, they would want to be with you too. Like that's what compatibility is. It's a mutual feeling. So it's not there. It's not there. And I would imagine because of stuff you went through as a kid, there's some part of your brain that just knows how to do this, that knows how to like fill in the gap. So somebody's like, you like them, they're so interesting, it brings you into technicolor as yourself to be around them. You really feel like you, it feels really good, right? And they're saying, but I'm not into you. But you're like, oh, that's okay, I can kind of move that thought over there and I can just look at this good feeling I have. And I'll be honest with you, for me, a lot of what healed it was when I developed a spiritual life, and I think that was a lot of what I was looking for, like even as a small kid. I had had spiritual experiences of being just totally seen and real and appreciative of all the nuance of life, and I could see that. And having somebody to share that with is such a delight, and it comes through different people at different times. And it's not always in every sense and every facet of it going to be the person you're married to. And for anybody who's single out there, I have a feeling that you generally know how to pick friends, like the ones who you go look at art with and the ones you like to take walks with and the ones you go to when you're sad. And it's so natural for us to want that all to be in one person. And really, basically, only through fantasy and limerence could we even imagine that one person would be all of that. It just isn't ever like that. It's so disappointing, right? It might be something that we felt as babies when we were with our moms before we even knew what all of the problems were going to be. And it was just this sense of completeness and oneness. So that union that you can feel with the aid of your imagination is so lovely, but it's almost impossible to get on earth. And so we struggle and we suffer. And so yes, here you are. The first year and a half of marriage, I think if we could take a poll of every married person in this audience, they would go, oh yeah, the first year and a half is hard. The first 2 years, sometimes more, are hard. It's a huge adjustment, even if you were living together before. Even if you had been together a long time, it's a hard adjustment to make that commitment, to go ahead and release that fantasy that this person is ever going to be anything else rather than what they have always been for you, that they're not going to magically turn into somebody with this capacity to heal you in some new way. Now that said, I will say that I found marriage in its way to be very healing. It was fundamentally just like primally healing about a certain thing, about not being alone. So it's very powerful in that sense. But my husband is not the perfect fulfillment of all the ways that my needs went unmet. He's just a person, and he's great because he stays with me and he shares his life with me and he shares my commitments with me and contributes his energy and love and money and everything to our enterprise of having a home and kids that are stepkids for him. And that's love. And he's with me on my birthday. And he cares about like what I want and where I want to live and what I like to eat. He cares about these things and he just keeps being there day after day. That's love. That's love. But there have been times in my life when I would have devalued that and continued to look for that limerence, that feeling like, we're like souls meant to be together. For a person with CPTSD, I'm just going to say that's a big red flag. Some people believe in twin souls or soulmates, and that can be a very dangerous thing for people who have wounds in the area of attachment. And I'm just going to put it out there. I don't want to disturb anybody's experience of life, but if you had a traumatic childhood, especially if you were neglected and abandoned by a parent, and you keep finding yourself like person after person thinking it's some kind of soulmate, there is something very bad there. It's not good. And it's very disruptive to the development of a real relationship where you see somebody and can be present. Because as much as you might see yourself as the person who's trying to hold on to and create this like incredible relationship, actually when you're holding on to a fantasy of a person, you're rejecting the real person. That's actually a rejection. And this is the strange thing when you have attachment problems, when you were wounded in that way as a kid, is that the stronger you feel sometimes, the less present you are. And you know who somebody's going to fall in love with is you present. It's your real self. People might fall into limerence with you, especially if you're younger, you're 30, you're at an age where that, could easily happen. And when you know, because you don't feel the same way, how unrealistic it is, how they're putting you up on a pedestal, it's like, hey, wake up, you're not even here. That's not what's going on between us right here. And then the big thing about limerence is looking for signs, like always searching. And I've been on both sides of that before. And when it's being done to me, when somebody's looking for signs and thinks they saw signs from me that I was into them and they were imagining it, it's really uncomfortable, honestly, and made me want to run away. It's kind of weird. But I've done it to other people, where there's like a little bit of communication and I'm searching and I'm like, but I think this is code for something and I think they mentioned this because what they really mean is that. And I'm supposed to interpret this as the opposite. If you're doing that, this is not a real relationship. It's not real love. When someone genuinely loves you, they don't leave you in doubt about that. They want you to know. They want you to know that they love you and that they're there. And they want to create this environment that you want to stay in that wouldn't scare you off. So that's a little bit about limerence. And Rachel, you may not have every aspect of what I talked about, but what you've got here is an idealized relationship with somebody who has said flat out they don't feel that way about you. And you asked me what to do. You have acknowledged this is dangerous for your marriage. I know you see everything here, but I have news you're probably not going to want to hear. The thing that you do about this is you end the relationship with the friend. That's what you do. I don't see, based on my experience, I don't see any way that you can have a friend with somebody who you're also in love with and have a successful marriage that's fair to the person to whom you took mutual vows of fidelity, all right? That is really important. When you make a promise to somebody, it doesn't mean that you're always going to have it easy to keep that promise. Sometimes it will seem like something outside yourself would be so much better. But the good news here is it's obvious that this is not better. And I'm sad with you just because you feel not alone with this friend and you have fun. And I'm sad that you don't have that yet with somebody else, but you will. You will have friends who are appropriate for a married woman, who are fun for you and who see you, and you're going to have to put yourself out there. I'm not going to assign bad motives to you here, but when you have a friendship with somebody you're in love with and you're married, one way of looking at that is you are in a deep state of avoidance. And I don't blame you at all. If the family you grew up in was enmeshed and codependent, maybe what you lack here is a sense of boundaries that you can actually be committed and close to somebody without losing yourself, without getting into an enmeshed and codependent relationship. The fact that you were sexually assaulted when you were young multiple times sounds like, I'm just going to guess, like whatever unhealthy dynamic was going on with the grown-ups, they couldn't protect you from that. Now, no parents are perfect, but if it happened multiple times, there was some kind of not seeing, not hearing, not talking, veiled everything. And that sounds terrible. And if you grew up that way, you have ahead of you a phase of your development where you heal that, where you teach yourself. A trusted marriage, a marriage where everybody's safe, is such a good place where people can learn things like that. How do I learn to give my commitment and be present to somebody without losing myself? The sort of quickie way to do that is I'll just sort of have this friend on the side who really, they really get me, I really love them. When you can't show up and be present for your marriage like that, even if they never realize what that energy is, you know it. People's hearts, whether they are conscious of what they're getting from another person or not, they feel it. And when somebody's not giving you the real love and they're giving it to somebody else instead, it's like you're robbing them. So when you made a decision to get married and be the wife and stepmom in this family, right, you made a promise that this good, sparkly, fun, talented part of you would be shared with them, let's say, every night at the dinner table. You're not always going to be like this ball of fire for them, but this special part of you is something that you committed to share with them and they with you. Well, the child doesn't make a commitment. They're just wonderful anyway. But your husband and you have promised to give each other the best of yourself in that way. And it doesn't mean you don't have friendships outside of it and pursuits. And I want you to have that, but with appropriate people for your marriage. Having a stable marriage is so healing for somebody with CPTSD. And from everything you're telling me, he's a perfectly good person and he totally deserves for you to not be giving away that like romantic energy to some secret relationship. That is so unfair to him. Your friend doesn't feel this way about you, so even if in some magical world where your husband could tolerate this and it would be no big deal, or it was an open relationship or something, your friend is not into you. And so you would always have this longing. The only way that you're able to keep this romantic idealization of him is because it never comes together, because it's always this separate thing. It's always this sort of pining away for something that you can't have. I'm going to bet $1,000 you had a parent like that where, you had to long for them. And so there's some part of you that really knows how to love deeply when you can't have something. But it's not love. It's not love. It's actually, it's a sort of a fever dream that comes out of pain. It comes out of pain and deprivation and a loss. So you're not going to believe that until you actually take the action of ending that relationship. And I'll tell you, when I ended all relationships like that, it was so awful. I cried. I thought, I can't possibly do this, but I wanted to be emotionally available. I had just met the man who's now my husband, and I knew I needed to get my you-know-what together. I needed to get it together and stop having all these little half relationships out there. And on the advice of a mentor, I ended all those relationships. I cried when I was doing it, and then within 45 minutes, I started to feel so powerful. I felt like, here I am. And it worked. And my husband's like, he's like together. He would never have wanted to be with somebody who had a bunch of friends on the side who was, kind of like not trustworthy. He would never have done that. If I could have pulled the wool over my eyes, he would have figured it out real quick, that I just wasn't all there. So I showed up. I got on my toes, and that's a sign when you get on your toes for somebody and do your best. That's a sign that they're good for you. They call you out to be your best. And if you and your husband have that, that's a really good sign. But the fact is, you've made this commitment to each other, and a child is counting on you and that stability at home. So I encourage you strongly, make the most of this marriage you've got with this guy that you love and is there for you and loves you. And let your fantasy go. Let it go and just see what happens. My first marriage was 32 years ago with my best friend ever, or at least I thought so. Mike and I were so connected in so many ways, I didn't expect that I was in love with him until I was. It took 1.5 years for us to recognize that, become a couple, and get married. It was great, but then it wasn't. He was doing drugs. And I had to make him leave, Lisa says. I was devastated, and it seemed he was too. He was sobbing his brains out, yet didn't want to go to rehab. He didn't want to do the work to keep us together. I came from a nightmare home with screaming, verbal abuse, physical abuse. Mostly my mom and brother got the physical abuse. What I did was hard-hearted, as everyone seemed to observe. Mike was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was so crushed, confused, and broken, but I recall saying to myself, I can't be like my mom and stay in an unhappy situation. So I did what I had to do, and we split. Got my pencil here, and I'm circling things I want to come back to when I go through this letter again. But let's just read through now. I remained in touch with Mike's parents, especially his mom. After our divorce, he was married 2 other times and divorced 2 more times. His mom used to fill me in here and there, but he was not our main topic. We were actual friends with other stuff to discuss. I never saw Mike after the divorce because he moved to another city, and that was that. As soon as the internet became a thing, I searched for him on a regular basis, even though I was with a new boyfriend to whom I eventually got married. It took me 5.5 years to agree to marry him, and when I did, it was because I needed his health insurance so I could return to school. My new husband and I did have fun through traveling, having lots of friends and a lot of socializing. Still, I searched and thought about Mike on a regular basis. I don't feel this was normal, but I could not stop myself, she says. After about 25 years, Mike's dad died. I asked his mom to please ask him if it was okay if I attended services. She said no need to ask, but I didn't want to feel intrusive. The day came, and at the service, Mike and I saw each other. We hugged and cried for what seemed like an hour. It was very emotional. His latest girlfriend was there and we were introduced. It was all laughs and a great to see you kind of vibe. He asked if we could be in touch on social media and I agreed. We never talked after that, but would occasionally like each other's pet photos and little things like that. Very generic. But I was secretly thrilled to know this guy again, my first and biggest love. The funniest, smartest person I've ever known was back, even if it was just via social media. So 2 years later, Mike's mom died, and he messaged me directly, and from that point we became reconnected, talking and laughing, and he apologized profusely about drugs and ruining our marriage. He even had a tattoo of us on his arm. I was a bit freaked out by that, but loved it, of course. All of this communication led to meetups, and I'm skipping ahead a bit, she says, or this will go on forever. The meetups led to a first kiss and then an affair. He was now engaged to the girl I had met, and I was still married. We both seemed to love every moment. Then he decided to get an advanced degree for a new career, and it all slowed down, but we still communicated almost daily. Just nothing about hooking up. It was mutual and equal. Then it wasn't. I could feel the pulling back on his end, but we continued on, discussing school, jobs, sports, and always music, which was our biggest bond. It's now been 2 years since we've seen each other. I go to therapy and he goes to class. It's been almost 3 years that he's been engaged. She is loaded and his keeper, if you will. Even after many times of him saying it'll never end until one of us is dead, he's slipping away. I know it and he knows it. The problem is that I cannot stop thinking or obsessing over him. I know it's affecting everything in my life. Although my husband doesn't know, I'm sure he can tell part of me is gone. I watch every video out there, go to therapy, speak to certain friends that know the truth. Nothing stops me from thinking about him. I'm obsessed and I do not want to be. I will always love him because I loved him, but I'm never going to have him. Am I so bored in my marriage, or am I traumatized once again by this ex-husband and due to my crappy childhood? I have always missed Mike, and our fling just makes me miss him all over again. It's ridiculous and I feel ridiculous. I do not regret our time together, but I need to make my brain stop because he's stopping, and I'm now trying to stop reaching out. I even sit on my hands, so I do not message him. He calls occasionally and we still text, but I need to stop waiting and living just to hear from him, and I can't. My therapist said it's because of my miserable childhood and not getting my needs met then. She says this is a trauma bond. She's right, you're right, but how do I make it stop? He can reach out, that's fine, but I need to stop living for it. He doesn't want me back. In the beginning, I was the one in control, and he wanted to know where I was and why he hadn't heard from me every 5 seconds, but that quickly turned, and now, alas, here I am, lonely and longing for any bit of attention from him. Please help if you can. From Lisa. Oh, Lisa, I'm so sorry. This is one of the most painful things in life, and right now, the options that you're facing are all painful, but I'm going to help you find the right way through, okay? I circled a bunch of things on your letter here that I wanted to come back to. All right, so I believe you're in your 50s now. So your first marriage was 32 years ago, and Mike had been your best friend ever, and then you fell in love, and you were married, and it was really great at first, but then it wasn't. And the only thing you say about what was great then was, it was great, but then it wasn't. That's a really short statement. Okay, and the reason was because he was doing drugs, and you didn't really say whether he had been using drugs the whole time and you just realized it, or he got into drugs, or what happened there, but I know firsthand how devastating it is to love somebody who turns out to be using drugs, and that it is an impossible situation, and he didn't want to go to rehab, and he didn't want to do the work to keep you together. Okay, so clue number one about Mike is not just that he was an addict and ruined your marriage, but he didn't want to do the work to keep you together. All right, and this shows up again later, so here we go. All right, and then you explain and my heart goes out to you. You come from a nightmare home with screaming, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and mostly your mom and brother got the abuse. That was how it was in my family too. What I did, you say, was hard-hearted, as everyone seemed to observe. Hold on a second there. I actually think leaving somebody who's addicted to drugs and not willing to stop is not hard-hearted. It's common sense. It's common sense. You don't give a lot of details about this, but when I hear the whole story here of what happened, and I'm just going to take your word for it. He was an addict, and there is no happy relationship to be had with somebody who cannot stop using. And some people who are using can stop, and they can heal, and it takes time, but he wasn't doing that. So I really think you did the right thing by getting out then, all right? But I can also see what it says to me, that you feel like you were too harsh, and I think that what got stuck in your mind is that you did it prematurely, that, you know, maybe you shouldn't have, that it was this great love. It ended up being so hard to find anything. And I believe that you guys loved each other. I get it. So then you say, Mike was the best thing that ever happened to you, okay? Well, okay, I'm just going to say, except that he turned out to be an addict and wasn't willing to do the work to be with you. And so, you know, I know that later you married somebody who does do the work to be with you. So I'm just going to sort of challenge that idea that this like wild child guy that you were with was the best thing that ever happened to you. What I'm hearing, and I totally understand, is that this relationship awakened a part of you that you don't ordinarily have access to. And that's a beautiful thing, and yet I suspect in people like you and like me what that is it's a trauma memory, and it's the satisfaction of a trauma wound with a fantasy. And as people with childhood PTSD, we sometimes have a really hard time telling the difference between what is a great love and incredible compatibility and what is something that has all the painful knife wounds of what happened to us as kids when it was terrible, and people could not do the work to honor us and treat us caringly, lovingly, in the way that we deserved, all right? You got that as a kid, you got that in your marriage. So I really question that it was the best thing that ever happened to you. I at least know that something much better can happen for you, okay? And you say, I was so crushed, confused, and broken. But I recall saying to myself, I can't be like my mom and stay in an unhappy situation. So I did what I had to do, and we split. Now, I don't know if you noticed that, but you've done exactly what your mom has done. You are staying in an unhappy situation, in this limbo. And we're going to talk about your marriage in a minute. But I don't mean just instantly that that's the bad thing. Your limbo is a living hell. You're suffering and suffering every day. And you have been for a long time, okay? So you know I'm the tough love fairy, and I think on some level you kind of knew what I was going to say when you wrote. But if you don't know, I'm going to tell it to you with great love and great understanding and relatedness, because I've been through this too. So then you say, I remained in touch with Mike's parents, and since you had been married to Mike, that's not crazy, especially his mom. And then he got married twice and divorced twice, so he had had 3 marriages. By the time you ran into him, he's got a fiance for a 4th marriage. And, you know, hey, people with CPTSD, that's often what it looks like. So no judgment, but just saying he does have, in the way that he has relationships, he has this pattern of, you know, going in and going out, going in and going out. It's not working out. And that would be also extremely consistent with somebody who is an addict and very charismatic, all right? Some people are addicts and nobody would marry them because the drugs just blatantly make them awful to be around, but he's a charismatic addict. That's how I would describe it from the little you're saying. So his mom would fill you in here and there, but it wasn't your main topic. You had an authentic relationship with her. And you know, after the way you grew up, I totally understand holding on to the family that you once had when you were with Mike. All right. So you never saw him after the divorce because he moved to another city, and that was that. And good. There were 25 whole years between getting divorced and bumping into him again, and that's good boundaries. But as soon as the internet became a thing, oh, wasn't that a crazy couple of years for those of us who get limerent, right? As soon as the internet became a thing, I searched for him on a regular basis, even though I was with a new boyfriend to whom I eventually got married. And So you searched for him even though you were with a new boyfriend. It took 5.5 years to agree to marry this guy, and when you did, it was because you needed his health insurance so that you could return to school. Okay, so I think what you're trying to tell me is, but I never really loved this guy. But what you're accidentally telling me is something quite terrible, all right? You're exploiting somebody. But here's the thing, if you're gonna be happy, Lisa, you cannot live in such a way that deeply deceives and hurts and uses other people. It just won't fly. It doesn't work that way. You can call it karma or you can call it inner peace, but you cannot have peace and you will not find love. Now, I'm not rendering judgment on this marriage. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But the fact that you're trying to tell me, oh, I just went into it for health insurance, that's just so morally wrong. And so going into it just for health insurance is sort of saying, I'm going to do something that looks like this conventional thing that people do called marriage, but I'm not really doing it. It's a material reason so that I can go to school. And if you grew up with trauma, I bet you your youth was extremely complicated. You didn't get that education really, or you couldn't be present for it, or you couldn't stay regulated enough to keep up with studies and move your career forward. And also the whole thing about money, like so many of us get financially hurt because of our trauma and because the families that we came from are so troubled. Like there is no money. And that's how I grew up. I got a little bit of money when my dad died when I was a teenager. It helped a little bit, but I was on financial aid. For a little bit I got Social Security benefits because my dad had died while I was a minor. I scraped together, and it took me a long time to finish college because I had to work, and I know what it is to have to scratch your way through survival, and how relationships play a role in that. And so I'm not standing here above you. I had relationships that I just needed so I had somewhere to live. I can see now how much, what a soul-sucking thing that was for all concerned, that I hurt other people, that I couldn't be happy, that I was never free, that when I did meet really great men, I had weird stuff, complications going on in my life that made me not seem like an ideal match to them, and they weren't really interested. So, okay, so then you say your new husband and you did have fun through traveling. You had lots of friends, you socialize a lot, and you still searched and thought about Mike on a regular basis. And you didn't feel this was normal, but you couldn't stop yourself. So, yeah, that's when you have limerent tendencies, that's what you're going to do. Somebody comes along, and the idea that, you had this miserable existence before that was so terrible that you had to rip yourself out of a marriage to get out of it. But now it's going to be better. And that idea comes in, and that is what we do. That's how trauma distorts our thinking. And when it gets control over our lives, it takes us right off the tracks. So I'm here, I'm your tough love fairy, I'm just calling it for what it is. You got limerent, that's like an infatuation and obsession on somebody you're not actually with. Like if you were actually with him, the same old problems would manifest. And it's interesting in your whole letter, you never say whether he stopped using drugs. Maybe he did and maybe he didn't. But if that's not like a hugely significant fact about him, whether he's using or not, he's still in that addictive behavior. He's having an affair. He gets into an affair right after he gets engaged. Like, who does that, right? Who does that is somebody who has just as much fear and avoidance as you have. Some people do avoidance by, they just don't get into relationships, but some of us have this subtler way where we want the simulation of a relationship or a marriage, but we don't give ourselves to it. And limerence really comes in as a way to sort of take this huge piece of our heart and our love and our the thing that we have to give to another person. If it were to be for real, we were like, here, I'm going to direct that over here, and then with this person, I'm going to have this limited thing. And some people will criticize it and say, oh, it's a strategy so that you don't get hurt. I don't think it's conscious. It's not my experience that it's anything conscious. It's, it's just like I can't help feeling like I need to eat food every day. I can't help feeling like I need to breathe every day. And there's a lot of behaviors that we can't help. They come so naturally to us because they're just wired in there. But while we do have to breathe and eat every day, we actually can change these behaviors. We can work on that brain level. We can work on the cultural level, the social level. We can heal these CPTSD symptoms. So take heart, all right? There is a way out of this. There's a way out of this hell and into peace and happiness for you, and something that feels good and just like organically good for your life, all right? It's here for you. And so I'm going to go through the letter and find it, okay? I mean, I know where I'm going with this. Okay. So then Mike's dad died, and he contacted you directly. Or no, the mom contacted you, and you came and you saw him, and you got into the affair. So yes, we started talking about the affair. You were thrilled to know him. So what's interesting is when you first saw him, he was with a girlfriend, and everything was like, hey, great to see you. We're friends. We're introduced. So right away, everybody goes into a fake persona, or at least you do. I can't really speak for the other two. Surely this girlfriend has been jealous and upset about you. I mean, unless she's completely high all the time and doesn't feel anything, she's noticing there's something going on, right? So you see him and you're thrilled, but everybody pretends, oh yes, we're just friends, we used to be married, hi, how's it going? And then he says, can we stay in touch? And yeah, that's not like crazy to stay in touch after 25 years. It seems like everybody can be friends. But the energy, the electric energy that you were feeling, probably he was too, and especially because he's an addict, that's my experience, that these things, like sometimes we're just tripping in our own mind, but sometimes both people feel them. And the fact that he entered into an affair with you means he was feeling it. So I don't doubt there was a real love between you and a real connection, and that even 25 years, like you could feel it right away. But oh, why is life like this? Sometimes the great love you feel is not compatible with daily life. And there it is, it's this great, thing that brings you out of yourself and helps you experience the eternal and feel connected with it and no union with another person. Except life with that person sucks. It can't be done. They won't do it. They can't do it. They have an addiction. They're with somebody else. And, he was only engaged, and I know you thought about this, Lisa, you didn't write about it, but he was only engaged. He could have broken that engagement, and he chose not to. So that was your clue, and it sounds like you were like, well, my marriage, I never was really feeling it, and I feel this, and maybe I can have both things. All right, you're certainly not the first person to give that a try. But just like everybody who's given it a try, you've got into a place of great pain. And so another thing I wanted to say that was significant, I noticed that you had a lack of empathy for your husband. I noticed you have a lack of empathy for Mike's now fiance, that you have a lack of empathy for her. I just didn't hear you say anything acknowledging what she was going through. And so, you may have seen my video about how complex PTSD can give us narcissistic traits. And that's what happens. The need for love is so voracious and so consuming that it drowns out empathy for other people, ordinary empathy. And I think intellectually you must realize that this woman is something terrible has been done to her by you and by Mike, and it's still being done by you guys because he's still in touch with you and you're still, wanting him and hoping he'll leave. And what about her? So again, I've been in your shoes, but when you're in the middle of limerence, it's another sort of weird kind of brain state where you can't perceive the full spectrum of reality. And I'm just here outside your limerence just going, oh yeah, this is terrible. You're a good person, but you're doing a bad person thing that's really inconsiderate towards two people who are being robbed of something that they've been promised and that they showed up for in good faith, right? And that is just morally devastating. And there's just no way to really live your life that way and be happy. So I want you to take hope. It's like, there it is. And it's funny, like you've been in therapy all these years, and your therapist is talking to you about it, your friends are talking to you about it, and you say you're watching videos, but none of those things are doing anything about it. And I don't know if people are calling you out on the fact that you're not taking action on this. What I hear you doing is you're waiting for him to decide if he's going to, like, call you or give you a little bit of that, intense love that you are craving now. It is like an addiction, isn't it? It is, and it's the stuff that what it does to your life is just like what drugs do to a person's life. So I just keep going back, like, you could not stay in an unhappy situation, so you did what you had to do and you split. And that's where you are right now. That's where we're going. So first we're going to deal with the matter of Mike. Okay. It's been 2 years since you've seen each other. You're going to therapy. He goes to class. He's still engaged. He still hasn't gotten married, and I'm not surprised. And I feel for that girlfriend, that fiance, that he's having an affair on the whole time. You're very logical. You're very reasonable. I can tell you're a good person, but this one little bitter line comes out about Mike's fiance. She's loaded, meaning she has a lot of money, and she's his keeper, if you will. So that sounds like some envy that she has money and you don't, and that's why he's with her. And you might be right. You might be right. If it's any satisfaction, I don't think it's going to work out between them, given the way that he's treated her. And it sounds also exploitative. So you project that he's with somebody because he just wants the money, but just calling you out here, does that echo a little bit how you're with somebody also because you want the financial security? So we've got two people here who had a great love, but they were not spiritually ready for it. And when I use the word ready, I'm not trying to give you hope, because I think that this situation has been burned out too hard to call it back. A really good relationship can only take so much. And it has certain, like, rubber band qualities. A really good, durable relationship, like real love, it has rubber band qualities in that, there can be hurts and it can come back, it comes back to its shape. But the stuff that you two have been through is so great. And because years went on with this, like, lying and hurting other people, my take on it is, this is too damaged. It's not only because he won't come back to you, it's because the good thing has been tainted by the toxic stuff. And it's so sad. But that can really happen, and that's why love is so precious. That's why caring for other people is something we strive so hard to learn how to do as people with CPTSD, because our traumatized behavior does spoil good and precious love, and that happens. But it doesn't have to anymore. You can make today the day that you don't do that anymore. Today can be the day that you clear it up. So you say you can't stop thinking or obsessing about him. It's affecting everything. Your husband doesn't know. I keep saying we're going to come back to your husband. He's very important in this. He can tell a part of you is gone. And I called this out before. You watch every video, you go to therapy, you speak to certain friends that know the truth. So I guess you had the idea that if you just kept talking about your feelings about him, that it would change. I used to think that too when I was in a situation that was a little like this. And I thought if I talked and talked and talked, I would pop out of it. But that's not what happened. You know what happened? It got worse and worse and worse. And it took on properties that were nothing like love. It was more like depression, self-attack, not wanting to live. It was terrible. And so, you know what the day that changed it for me is my friend who showed me the daily practice that I teach everybody. I mention it in every video. It's always down in the description section if you want to try it, but this is a technique. What I really needed was not to be obsessed on something that wasn't there. What I really needed was a way to find comfort and meaning and rest and clarity. That's what I really needed. And by a stroke of amazing good fortune, I met somebody who showed me these techniques where I could just get these horrible thoughts and feelings out of my head onto paper and then rest my mind. And it's 2 specific techniques. It's easy, it's free, you can learn it too. But that's what happened. And my friend taught me this. And then I said, I'm still really troubled about this relationship, so obsessed and can't let go. She was just like, oh, having any kind of contact that has romantic intent with a married person is wrong. And if you want to get happy now, cut it off. That simple, okay? And I literally, nobody had ever told me that who I'd gone to for help. Now everyone knows that, but I was being very selective, I think, about where I would go. And so I was going to this therapist and we were drawing pictures about it and talking about dreams and, you know, why was I sad and what was the last interaction like? And, you know, this is a long time ago. But she had never said, and I guess I had really carefully picked friends who wouldn't challenge me, who would just say, cut it off. And that when she said it to me, at first it struck me like somebody just took a sword and stuck it through my heart. And then I just realized, of course, that's it. And I did it. I cried for about 45 minutes. And then I felt so good. I felt free. Of course, that's what it is. You cut off contact with these people. So you'll hear me say this. We've been talking about limerence in other videos and, you know, people who get stuck and their whole, you know, your whole life, it's like pouring cement on the engine of your life to get stuck in something like this. It's so just life destroying. And there's a solution. And the first thing you do is you stop pouring cement on it. You stop having contact. So sometimes you need a friend like me to just get in there and say, let's look at it. Were you happy? No. When you were with him, you were miserable. You know, was he available to you? No. One of the hallmark signs of a relationship that's good and right for you is that that person can be with you and will be with you. And if they cannot or will not be with you, they are not the love of your life. They are not. They might be an ex-love, but they are not for you. And there it is. And I say that like in my really stern teacher voice because it just needs to get through. It needs to get through the fantasy of like, because when you are a kid and you're dealing with the abuse and the horrible stuff that you went through, it's so easy to think, right? It's like, yeah, you know, Dad's hitting Mom and my brother all the time, but actually everything's okay. And then you go to school and everybody's like, well, how are you, Lisa? And you're like, I'm fine. And right? You get so good at that. I call it crap fit. You probably know that if you watch my videos. You fit yourself to crap. And you've been doing that all along. You've been fitting yourself to crap. And you've been trying to survive. You've been using crap fit to get by in the world. And so one little thing I want to put out there for you is if financial insecurity is a thing for you, whatever you do about your marriage, I really encourage you to get out there and get a way to make money and to have health insurance so you never again have to set up some fake relationship that you're miserable in so that you can have health insurance. I know how hard it is. It's crazy expensive, but it would be better to go on public assistance and get that kind of insurance, which is not ideal, I know, and a lot of hassle and paperwork. It's not ideal, but it's still, you still get to be a free person and not exploiting anybody else for your security, not deceiving anybody else. Oh yeah, your therapist says this is because of your childhood. It's like, yeah, but I just want to, yeah, obviously, your childhood, everything that's happening here is what we do. It's what happens to people with CPTSD. So I agree that it's because of that, but I don't know what came after that. You say you don't know how to make it stop. So since your therapist didn't tell you, here's what you do. You're not going to see Mike again, all right? If you want to use my technique here, don't see him again. You send him a text, if that's the safe way that you can communicate without harming ever again his fiance. Now, whether they work it out or not, that's no longer your concern. But you're not going to get in there to apologize. You're not going to try to explain anything, and you're not going to try to get closure. Closure is a fake word. It means opening, really, when you're addicted to somebody. So you go in there, so you send a text and say, I've thought about it, and I've realized that for my own mental health, I need to not have contact with you. This is goodbye, and I wish you the best. That's all you have to say. You don't even have to say, I wish you the best, but go ahead, just send that goodwill. And then what you do is you block text, calls, social media. And you can, social media lets you block people. As a person on YouTube, I know all about it. When people get yucky, I can block them. So you can block people. And if you have to change your number, change your number. Since he shows signs of being somebody who's in active addiction, either with substances and or in relationships, getting cut off by you could trigger a fake, this like reaction of like, oh, gimme, 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 and he might try to make contact with you. So for you to be strong for that, I'm just telling you, he may do that again, but it's going to be the same fake kind of interest in you that doesn't involve saying, I've realized I love you, I totally stopped using drugs, I got my life together, and I only want to be with you right now if you're willing to leave your marriage. Like if he didn't say that, and if anything he says now to try to keep the little dopamine thread going with you, because that's what it is, right? Life feels empty, and you can always like send a little text and get that little, he called. And he's getting the same thing from it. And he makes contact when he needs a little lift, when he's feeling empty. All right? When a person loves you, they don't put you through this. This is such a hard video, isn't it, Lisa? And but I just want to be straight with you. It's not love when somebody does this to you, keeps you on a string, and does not show up to be in your life and give you love. So you can have love. You can have it. And this brings us to the question of your husband. So you're in a marriage that what you're saying is not really a real marriage, that you got into it for financial reasons, and that you have friends together and you've had travel and it's fun, but you're not really feeling it. It may be that you got married under false pretenses and the right thing to do for his sake, and we really have to consider what's best for him, because getting married is making a promise to somebody. And sometimes we have to break that promise, but this requires careful thought. Whether you think that if you could detox from this addictive relationship you've been in, if you would like to give that some time to see if your feelings can blossom for your husband, I would totally back you on that. But it has to be a really clean thing. And whether you do that or whether you immediately exit the marriage, I'm really encouraging you to possibly change your therapist. I think therapy is a great idea, but if you had therapy for 2 years and you don't know how to make these things stop, which is just a tactical set of actions, if you don't know, I think you may want to get a therapist who's a little more experienced with love addiction and who can help you draw your boundaries and hold them and talk more about the boundaries and not the feelings that make you want to cross the boundaries. The feelings are going to be there. It'd be like if somebody were addicted to drugs and just wanted to go talk about the drugs all the time and how it felt to be high and how much you miss them, rather than, okay, what are you going to do to stay clean today, right? What are you going to do to stay away from the people who you know are going to be tempting to you? Let's make a plan. So those are the people you need. Friends too. So friends who really support that. One thing you can do, I have a dating course, and I feel like this is not the time for you to go dating, but what I want to call your attention to is that I start everybody out with writing down what they really want. What do they really want? And so you can start now writing that down, and as you detox and as your mind clears, you can keep updating that and to get clearer what you really want. But under no circumstances, I just know you don't want some guy who's like engaged to somebody else. Like, why would you want that, right? That's not what you want. So you can begin to just lay out there is something you want, and that can kind of help you endure the withdrawal that's going to come. It is withdrawal as you let go for good and make no more contact with this guy who's been life-sucking for you. You were doing okay, and then this came, and so now there's still time for your life to be happy. There's time for you to have a wonderful relationship. So your husband is stuck by you. Somehow he doesn't know. That's a little odd, because it seems like it might, anybody sensitive might know, but maybe you've been very good at hiding it. But I think that a therapist and friends could help support you over time to make a decision within 90 days if you're going to try to make it work with your husband or not. And he certainly deserves a chance as a person, but if you're not feeling it, then the most loving and honorable thing to do is to end that relationship. And I thought a lot about this question of whether you tell him what's been going on. That's a hard one. A lot of people are just like an automatic yes, tell, always, honesty. You can't have a good relationship without honesty. And so that's one that needs to be worked out with you and people you trust who know the details of the situation with you and your husband. But I will just say that if you do decide to be honest, it needs to be entirely limited to what needs to be said for him to understand the situation. that you have not been fully in the marriage, and either yes, you want to work it out with him, or no, you're ending the marriage. That it needs to be clear and not drag him into a chaotic, confusing, heart-wrenching thing. So for that, that's why I say, I really encourage you to do this with a strong therapist, or perhaps consider going to a 12-step program for love addiction and getting the best sponsor in the room. Go to enough meetings, notice the woman who's really kick-ass, and ask her to sponsor you and to help you do this cleanly. The thing about CPTSD, and especially limerent thinking, is we can't think clearly for ourselves. We have to bring other people into the decision process. You can too, okay? You can do that. The other thing I'm going to recommend, whatever you decide to do or how to handle this, is try out my daily practice. You need a place to self-comfort. There needs to be a way to do that without resorting to texting him, thinking about him, talking about him. And did I mention that? Don't just not have contact with him. Don't think about him. Don't talk about him. And I know some thoughts are involuntary. They'll come up in dreams, but you can do this. If you have to start training yourself. If you catch yourself thinking about him, have a go-to happy thought that you have instead. All right? And if you catch yourself talking about him, just pull back. And with your friends, just say, I'm trying not to talk about him. I think this is an extremely underrated technique for getting somebody out of your mind. Don't think about them. Don't talk about them. And so sometimes our friends and even therapists can enable us in continuing to stay obsessed by letting us talk about it, and as if that's going to lead to some breakthrough. If it hasn't led to a breakthrough by now, talking about it is necessary up to a point, but if you haven't had a breakthrough yet, I don't think it's going there. I don't think that's going there. What I see here is you need peace. You need a nice clean slate, sort of like somebody who walks into a river and bathes themselves and comes out on the other side and wraps themselves in a white robe, and just being safe and putting down and cleansing away all this stuff you've been doing to try to find love that's hurting you and hurting other people. And you'll find that when you're making a good and noble endeavor like this, the right people to help you will show up. And sometimes you'll just find that the wind is under your wings. You get help. You get help to get through the hard nights. There's going to be a lot of tears, a lot of feelings, because that's what addictions do, is they're helping us handle and suppress this well of pain we've got. And the interesting thing about pain is it's just sadness, it's grief, it's some anger. And especially if you have a comforting technique like the daily practice that I teach, it can just kind of come up and you cry and you feel mad and it just rolls through you, and it's just a wave that passes. And then you have a quiet period where you can do the laundry, get a job, do the dishes, call your friend, get your nails done, whatever it is that's just daily life for you, right? So that's how it's done. You asked, how do I make it stop? And that is how.